Columbia Pictures Studios, 1936. 8 o'clock in the morning, stage lights blazing, cameras ready, technical crew in position, and Louis Armstrong standing in the corner, trying to hide the fact that his hands were shaking. He was 35 years old, world famous as a musician, but now he was about to do something completely different, something he'd never done before. Acting, in front of cameras, with dialogue, with blocking, with direction. And his co-star wasn't just anyone. It was Bing Crosby, Hollywood's biggest star, the most experienced actor in the business. Louis felt unprepared, inadequate, terrified. Director Norman MacLeod approached. "Ready, Louis?" Louis nodded, but he wasn't ready. The camera started rolling, and Louis Armstrong did something in that moment. Something that would shock everyone on set. He became himself, just himself. Nothing more, nothing less. And what happened on screen stunned the entire crew. After the scene ended, Bing Crosby walked off set, went straight to the producer's office. What he said in that office was astonishing. But what exactly did Bing say? What did Louis do in that first scene? And how did a musician with zero acting experience leave Hollywood's greatest star speechless? Before we explore this incredible story of breaking barriers and discovering authenticity, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. What you're about to witness will remind you that being yourself is more powerful than any performance. The information in this video is compiled from documented interviews, archival news, books, and historical reports. For narrative purposes, some parts are dramatized and may not represent 100% factual accuracy. We also use AI-assisted visuals and AI narration for cinematic reconstruction. The use of AI does not mean the story is fake. It is a storytelling tool. Our goal is to recreate the spirit of that era as faithfully as possible. Enjoy watching. To understand what happened that morning at Columbia Pictures, we need to go back. Not just days or weeks, but months. We need to understand how Louis Armstrong, a trumpet player from New Orleans, ended up in Hollywood preparing to act alongside Bing Crosby. And we need to understand the impossible barriers he was facing. In early 1936, Louis Armstrong was at the peak of his musical career. He'd recorded hundreds of songs, toured across America and Europe. His trumpet playing had revolutionized jazz. His distinctive gravelly voice was recognized worldwide. Louis was successful beyond what anyone from his background could have imagined. But Hollywood was a different world. A world Louis had barely touched. He'd appeared in a few short music films, 9-minute productions where he played trumpet and didn't speak. Films like A Rhapsody in Black and Blue from 1932. In those shorts, Louis performed, entertained, but never acted, never delivered dialogue, never inhabited a character. That was the domain of trained actors. And in 1936 Hollywood, there were very specific ideas about what black actors could do. Most black performers in films were relegated to servant roles, maids, butlers, comic relief characters designed to make white audiences laugh. Rarely were black actors given substantial parts. Almost never were they presented as equals to white stars. The idea of Louis Armstrong, a black musician, appearing as a co-star alongside Bing Crosby, one of Hollywood's biggest white stars, was revolutionary, dangerous even. Studios worried about Southern audiences, about boycotts, about controversy. When Columbia Pictures announced Pennies from Heaven would star Bing Crosby and feature Louis Armstrong, the studio's marketing department was nervous. How would they sell this? How would audiences react? But Bing Crosby had insisted. He admired Louis' music, respected his talent, wanted to work with him, and Bing's star power was so immense that the studio agreed. In March 1936, Louis received the script for Pennies from Heaven. It arrived at his home in New York. Louis sat at his kitchen table and opened the envelope. Inside were pages of dialogue, stage directions, character descriptions. Louis stared at the pages. He could read music fluently, could improvise complex trumpet solos without thinking. But this was completely foreign. Louis had a character, a role, lines to memorize, scenes to learn. He wasn't just playing himself, he was supposed to be someone else. For the first time in his career, Louis felt genuinely out of his depth. Music came naturally to him, always had. But acting, he had no training, no experience, no idea if he could even do it. Louis called his manager, Joe Glazer. "Joe, I don't know if I can do this. I'm a trumpet player, not an actor." Glazer tried to reassure him. "Louis, you perform every night. You connect with audiences. You know how to be on stage. This is just a different kind of stage." But Louis wasn't convinced. Performing music was intuitive. He knew when to play, when to pause, how to read an audience. But following a script, hitting marks, delivering lines exactly as written, that was different. Over the next few weeks, Louis tried to prepare. He read the script again and again, tried to memorize his lines, practiced in front of a mirror. But the words felt awkward, unnatural, like he was pretending to be someone he wasn't. In late April, Louis traveled to Los Angeles for filming. He checked into a hotel, not the same hotel where Bing Crosby and the white cast members were staying. Segregation was still the norm. Even successful black performers like Louis were subject to humiliation and separation. Louis arrived at Columbia Pictures Studios the day before filming began, walked onto the soundstage where Pennies from Heaven would be shot. The set was impressive, detailed, professional. Louis had performed in theaters and clubs across the world, but a movie set was different. Cameras, lights, marks on the floor showing where to stand, microphones hanging overhead, technical crew everywhere. It was overwhelming. Director Norman MacLeod introduced himself. He was kind, welcoming, told Louis he was excited to work with him. But Louis could see concern in MacLeod's eyes. The director had worked with trained actors his entire career. Now he had a musician with no acting experience. MacLeod had to be wondering if this would work. That night, Louis barely slept. Tossed and turned in his hotel room, kept running lines in his head, kept imagining everything that could go wrong. What if he froze in front of the camera? What if he couldn't remember his lines? What if he embarrassed himself in front of Bing Crosby and the entire crew? The next morning, Louis arrived at the studio at 6:30. Makeup and wardrobe were waiting. They prepared him for his first scene. When Louis looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. He looked like a movie character, not like Louis Armstrong. At 7:45, Louis was called to set. The crew was setting up for the first scene. Bing Crosby was already there, relaxed, confident, chatting with the crew like they were old friends. When Bing saw Louis, he walked over, extended his hand. "Louis, great to finally work with you. I've been a fan of your music for years." Louis shook Bing's hand, tried to smile, but his stomach was churning. Bing Crosby was so comfortable, so natural, so at ease in this environment. And Louis felt like an imposter. Director MacLeod called everyone to positions, explained the scene. It was a dialogue scene. Louis and Bing talking, simple enough on paper, but for Louis, it felt monumental. Have you ever had to do something completely outside your comfort zone with everyone watching? Share your experience in the comments. Before they rolled camera, Louis approached MacLeod. His voice was quiet, almost embarrassed. "Mr. MacLeod, I need to tell you something. I'm a musician. I don't know this acting thing. If I do something wrong, please tell me." MacLeod looked at Louis, saw the genuine nervousness, the humility, and the director made a decision that would change everything. MacLeod put his hand on Louis's shoulder. "Louis, here's what I want you to do. Don't act. Don't try to be someone else. Just be Louis Armstrong. That's all. The camera will love you if you're just yourself." Louis wasn't sure what that meant. Wasn't acting about becoming a character, about pretending. But MacLeod's instruction was clear. Don't pretend. Be yourself. The assistant director called out, "Rolling." The camera operator confirmed, "Speed." McLeod looked at Louis one more time, gave him an encouraging nod, then called, "Action." Louis took a breath, and something happened. Something clicked inside him. He stopped trying to act, stopped trying to remember lines perfectly, just responded, naturally, the way he would respond to anyone, the way he'd been responding to people his entire life. The scene involved Louis and Bing having a conversation. In the script, it was formal, structured, but Louis brought something else to it. Warmth, humor, authenticity. He didn't deliver lines. He spoke. When Bing said something, Louis reacted. Really reacted. Not the way he thought an actor should react. The way Louis Armstrong would react. The technical crew noticed something immediately. Louis had an incredible instinct for where the camera was. Most new actors looked at the camera by mistake, or stood in the wrong position. But Louis, despite never having done this before, seemed to know exactly where to be, how to angle his body, when to make eye contact with Bing, and when to look away. Years of performing on stage, reading audiences, understanding spatial dynamics, all translated perfectly to film. The scene lasted about 2 minutes. When McLeod called cut, there was a moment of silence on set. Then the script supervisor spoke up. "That was perfect. One take." McLeod looked surprised. "Really?" The script supervisor nodded. Everything was there. Performance, timing, marks, everything. Bing Crosby was standing off to the side. He had a strange expression on his face. Not anger, not disappointment, something else. Amazement. Without saying anything to anyone, Bing walked off set, headed straight for the production offices, found producer William LeBaron in his office. LeBaron looked up. "Bing, everything okay?" Bing sat down. "Bill, we need to talk about Louis Armstrong." LeBaron's face fell. He'd been worried about this. Worried that the pairing wouldn't work, that there'd be tension. "What's wrong?" Bing leaned forward. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. Bill, this guy isn't a professional actor, but I just watched him on camera, and I've never seen anything like it. The camera loves him. The audience is going to watch him, not me." LeBaron was stunned. Bing Crosby, the biggest star in Hollywood, saying the audience would watch Louis instead of him. "You're serious?" Bing nodded. "Completely serious. Louis doesn't act. He just is. And that's more powerful than anything I've learned in 10 years of making movies. We need to give him more screen time, more scenes. This guy is a natural." LeBaron sat back, processed what Bing was saying. This changed things. If Bing Crosby, who had every reason to protect his star status, was advocating for Louis to have more presence in the film, then Louis must truly be special. Over the next few weeks of filming, something beautiful developed on the Pennies from Heaven set. In 1936, racial segregation was the norm on Hollywood sets. Black actors typically had separate dressing areas, separate eating areas, separate bathrooms. They were kept apart from white cast and crew. But Bing Crosby refused to follow that norm. From day one, Bing treated Louis as an equal. They ate lunch together in the commissary, sat together between takes, walked the studio lot side by side. When other crew members saw Bing Crosby, the biggest star in Hollywood, treating Louis Armstrong with complete respect and equality, they followed suit. The atmosphere on set became one of mutual respect, of collaboration, of genuine friendship developing between two men from very different backgrounds. Louis noticed, appreciated it. Bing could have maintained distance, could have treated Louis as a supporting player, but Bing's character wouldn't allow it. He saw Louis as a fellow artist, a peer, and treated him accordingly. As filming continued, Louis grew more comfortable, not because he learned acting techniques, but because he realized McLeod had been right. Being himself was enough. Every scene Louis filmed, he brought authenticity. When the script called for humor, Louis' natural warmth and playfulness came through. When it called for sincerity, Louis' genuine kindness was evident. He wasn't performing emotions, he was experiencing them. The technical crew marveled at Louis' camera instincts. The cinematographer told MacLeod, "I've worked with trained actors who can't find their light the way Louis does naturally. He moves, and somehow he's always perfectly framed." It was the result of decades performing on stage, reading rooms, understanding sight lines, knowing how to position himself so everyone could see and hear him. All those skills translated seamlessly to film. By the third week of filming, something had shifted in Louis' confidence. He still didn't consider himself an actor, but he'd stopped being afraid, stopped second-guessing himself, just showed up and was present, responsive, real. Bing watched this transformation with fascination. One day between takes, Bing and Louis were sitting in directors' chairs waiting for the crew to reset lights. Bing turned to Louis. "You know what you've taught me?" Louis looked surprised. "I taught you something." Bing nodded. "I've been making movies for years. I've taken acting classes, worked with dialogue coaches, learned all these techniques for how to behave on camera. And then you show up with zero training, and you're better than most professionals I've worked with." Louis was embarrassed. "Bing, I'm not better than." Bing interrupted. "You are, because you're not acting, you're just being. And that's what the camera wants. That's what audiences want. Authenticity. I've been so focused on technique that I forgot the most important thing, being real." This conversation would stay with both men for the rest of their lives. For Louis, it validated that his lack of formal training wasn't a weakness. For Bing, it was a reminder that sometimes the most powerful performances come from truth, not technique. Please subscribe if this story is inspiring you. What happens when the film is released will show you the true power of authenticity. Filming wrapped in June 1936. Louis returned to his music career, touring, recording, being Louis Armstrong. But something had changed. He'd proven to himself that he could do something completely outside his comfort zone, that he could enter a world where he had no experience and not just survive but excel. In October 1936, Pennies from Heaven premiered in New York. Louis attended the premiere, sat in the theater with hundreds of other people, watched himself on screen for the first time in a full-length feature film. When Louis appeared on screen, something happened. The audience responded, not just to his music, which was featured prominently, but to his presence, his warmth, his authenticity. After the screening, critics wrote their reviews. Variety, the entertainment industry's most influential publication, wrote, "Armstrong's performance is the film's surprise element. Beyond his musical talents, he presents genuine cinematic charisma. He holds the screen with natural ease that trained actors work years to achieve." The New York Times noted, "Louis Armstrong proves that artistry transcends medium. His presence on film is as commanding as his trumpet playing. A revelation." The reviews shocked Hollywood, not because Louis was good, but because he was being recognized as a legitimate actor, not a musician playing himself, an actor. This was unprecedented for a black performer in 1936. Typically, black actors were mentioned briefly, if at all, praised for being entertaining or amusing, but never taken seriously as dramatic performers. Louis was being reviewed like any other actor in the film, compared favorably to trained professionals, recognized for skill, not just novelty. The success of Pennies from Heaven and the recognition of Louis' performance began slowly shifting perceptions in Hollywood. Studio executives started realizing that audiences would accept black performers in substantial roles, that talent could transcend racial prejudices, that authentic performances resonated regardless of an actor's background. It didn't change everything overnight. Hollywood's racism was deeply entrenched, but it opened a door, created a possibility, showed that the rules could be bent. For Louis, the experience was valuable, but he never pursued acting seriously. He did appear in more films over the years, but music remained his primary passion. Acting was something he could do. Music was who he was. But the friendship that began on the Pennies from Heaven set became one of the most important relationships of Louis' life. Louis and Bing stayed close for decades, performed together many times, on radio shows, television specials, concert stages. There was genuine affection between them, mutual respect. Bing never forgot what Louis taught him that day on set: the power of authenticity, the strength of being yourself rather than trying to be what you think others want. In interviews over the years, Bing often talked about working with Louis. Louis Armstrong taught me more about performing in 3 weeks than I learned in 10 years of film school. He showed me that the camera sees through pretense. It responds to truth. Louis never pretended to be anything he wasn't, and that's why audiences loved him. Louis, in his typical humble way, downplayed his acting abilities. I just did what they told me, and tried not to mess up. Bing's the real actor. I just played trumpet and talked to people. But those who were on set that day in 1936 knew differently. They'd witnessed something special. A man with no training stepping into an unfamiliar world and succeeding not through technique, but through authenticity. When Louis Armstrong died in July 1971, Bing Crosby was devastated. He attended the funeral, was asked to speak. Bing stood at the podium, looked at the crowd of mourners, and talked about many things: Louis' music, his impact on culture, his kindness. But Bing also talked about that day in 1936. The first time I worked with Louis on film, I was already established. I'd made dozens of movies. I thought I knew what I was doing. Then Louis walked on set, and with zero acting experience, he showed me what real performance looks like. He taught me that audiences don't want perfect technique. They want truth. They want to connect with a real human being. Louis was always real, never put on airs, never pretended to be something he wasn't, on camera or off. That's why people loved him. That's why I loved him. Bing's voice broke. He couldn't continue for a moment. When he regained composure, he said one more thing: Louis Armstrong made me a better performer, made me a better person, taught me that success isn't about how well you can pretend. It's about how courageously you can be yourself. I'm grateful I got to know him, got to work with him, got to call him my friend. Today, Pennies from Heaven is remembered as an important film in Hollywood history, not just for the music, not just for Bing Crosby's performance, but for what Louis Armstrong represented. A black performer given substantial screen time, treated as an equal to white stars, recognized for talent, not tokenism, proving that authenticity transcends training, that being genuine is more powerful than being polished, that sometimes the person with the least experience teaches the most important lessons. Thank you, Louis Armstrong, for having the courage to step into an unfamiliar world, for trusting yourself when you had every reason to doubt, for showing that authenticity is the most powerful performance tool. Thank you, Bing Crosby, for recognizing greatness regardless of background, for treating Louis as an equal when the world expected separation, for learning from someone society told you was beneath you. Thank you, Norman MacLeod, for seeing past traditional actor training, for giving Louis permission to be himself, for understanding that sometimes the best direction is no direction at all. That morning at Columbia Pictures, that first scene, that moment when Louis Armstrong stopped trying to act and just became himself, forever teaching us, forever reminding us, that the world doesn't need more people pretending to be something they're not. The world needs people courageous enough to be exactly who they are. That technique can be learned, training can be acquired, but authenticity, that's something you either bring or you don't. And Louis brought it. Every day, every scene, every moment. Not because he was trying to, but because he didn't know how to be anyone except Louis Armstrong. The cameras stopped rolling decades ago. The lights dimmed. The set was struck. But the lesson remains. Bright, clear, undeniable. Be yourself, unapologetically, completely,
courageously, because your authentic self is more powerful than any role you could play, more compelling than any character you could inhabit, more valuable than any performance you could give. Lewis proved it that day, and every day after, until his last breath. Always himself, always authentic, always Lewis. That's the real performance, the one that matters, the one that lasts forever.